Wisdom. It's an incredibly valuable asset. Some would say more precious than gold. It's attractive, appealing, admirable. Conversely, a lack of wisdom is the basis of immaturity, blind spots, and bad decisions. Wisdom. It can be gained over time, but it can't be rushed. But wisdom can be shared. That's precisely what we are here to do right now. Today, we are here to hack wisdom, to distill it, to understand it, and to process it. Why? To get better at life. Welcome to the main thing. This is your new 9-minute podcast. I'm your host, Skip Lineberg, and I've set out to interview the wisest people I know. We'll see what we can learn from each one when they're faced with an incredibly difficult, soul-piercing question. Hey, this is Skip, your host. It's always great to welcome you back here to this place of wisdom, learning, and personal growth. It's our little learning space, and I'm honored to share it with you each and every time. Today, we're doing something a little different. You see, I'll be sharing wisdom with you, but there won't be a guest. Just me sharing wisdom. A short wisdom lesson, about 12 minutes total. So we're calling these special editions Skip's Quips. Don't worry, we'll still bring you wisdom conversations with our special wise guests twice a month, just like always. I hope you'll find these Skip's Quips a nice complement to our regular wisdom programming. We'll plan to do these about 6 times a year, about every other month. That's extra wisdom for you. Now, get ready for our next episode of Skip's Quips on the Main Thing podcast. His name was Ootsie. Or at least, that's what everyone called him at the McDonald's on the North End. Ootsie was the type of boss whose reputation preceded him. If he was on shift, things were going to run smoothly, without him ever raising his voice, cracking a whip, or doing anything other than just, being himself. At age 22, he seemed both older and younger than his years. It was rumored his real name might have been Charles, but no one dared to ask. How do I know all this? Well, I was working there. And as for me, I was 16, driving a hand-me-down pale blue Ford Falcon that we lovingly called the Falcoon. And the pride of that ride was that it was entirely mine to own. It had 188,000 miles and a do-it-yourself patch job on the left rear fender that still showed its pop rivets and Bondo. But it worked, and I had a job to keep it on the road. So that was that. My pay was my gas, my freedom, and all the adventure a 16-year-old can imagine on a tank full of fuel. So naturally, my job mattered. Back then, right before I met Ootsie, I'd been recently working at the Red Barn, a downscale fast food place where I'd been slinging fried chicken at $3.15 an hour under the ever-watchful, often critical eye of Mrs. Burdett, a manager as strict as her name sounds. She once docked my hours by making me work off the clock late in the night, all in the name of her trimming her labor costs and making her labor goal for the day. Her methods taught me one thing fast. When you're young, inexperienced, and a little desperate, your boss matters just as much as the pay rate. Lucky for me, I had a friend named Sam. Sam was a bit older, a guy in a class ahead of me. He had a perfect blonde side part hairdo, a midnight blue Mustang, and a bit of swagger in his step. Everything I didn't have. One day, while casually leaning on that convertible, with just a hint of nonchalance, Sam gave me a tip. Hey, Skip, you should fill out an application at McDonald's. We're hiring. The pay is better, and the people, way better. With that tip and Sam's endorsement supporting me, I got the job. And just like that, I became one of Ootsie's boys. By all accounts, Ootsie wasn't the typical McDonald's manager. He was fair but firm, always professional but with an undeniable edge. There was an energy in his walk and ease that made you think, this guy knows what he's doing. This guy knows things. He wore his authority quietly, so much so that rumors swirled around the store. Was he a relative of the owner's? A nephew? Maybe a stepson? We never asked. It didn't really matter anyway. I eventually secured a spot as a closer on his shift. When that day arrived, I was officially on the A-team, and everyone knew if you were closing with Ootsie, the standards were high. There was pride in being part of his team, a duty that went beyond the job description and into something more, and there was a certain order to the way the night's work played out. For my first couple of shifts, I was stationed in the dish room, washing endless stacks of greasy trays and utensils, in the inner guts of a shake machine with more parts and O-rings and bolts and nuts that had to be sanitized than you can ever imagine. But eventually I graduated up to the position of grillback. That title might sound unimpressive, but to me, it meant moving up. The grillback is the one who dresses the sandwiches. You're not the one that cooks the burgers, but you're the one that toasts the buns, puts the toppings on the Big Macs with just the right amount of secret sauce, puts the cheese on the quarter pounders, and with the final sprinkle of lettuce, I slide my masterpieces across the counter where the front of the house team would take over. But the real magic of the closing crew happened after hours, after the last customer left, after the doors were locked and the cash drawer counted. The store went from bright and bustling to dim and quiet, and that's where the rhythm changed. There were 100 things to clean and prep before the next day, and everything had to be signed off by Ootsie. That night, on one of my first closing shifts, I would learn a lesson from him that still sticks with me years later. After hustling through my cleaning duties, wiping and scrubbing the grill area and stocking every bin I could see or think of, I made my way up front, proudly announcing to Ootsie, "I'm ready." He gave me a quick nod, and together we walked back to my station for the final inspection. Everyone knew he had very high standards. My nerves tingled a little, but I was proud of what I had done. I'd done good work. I'd give it my best. The grill gleamed, the counters were polished, and every bin was stocked to perfection. Ootsie walked around, barely moving his head, glancing at things quickly. I held my breath. I could almost feel my palms start to sweat as he finally stopped, turned to me, and asked, "Looks good to you?" I nodded affirmative, yeah, maybe a little too eagerly. And then came a question that would stick with me forever. "Great, now do me a favor, go get the step ladder. You know, the one that's back there between the manager's office and the dish area." I knew, but I hesitated. A step ladder? Ootsie piped in, "You know, Skip, the 3-step one from back by the dishwashing area," he clarified. I quickly scrambled to retrieve it, and before I could even process the reason, there I was back, ladder in hand. "Set it up right there by the grill and climb to the middle step," he said, a hint of amusement playing on his face. With a sigh, I did as he said, not fully understanding yet where this was going. As I climbed up to the middle step, my view shifted. All of a sudden, I could see the tops of range hoods, those neglected places where grease smudged metal and tiny bits of wrapper or plastic hid in plain sight. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. He'd managed to show me all the things I'd missed without even saying a word. He spun on his heel and started to walk away. Looking over his shoulder, he said, "Skip, when you've got something important, something with your name on it, don't forget to look at it from every angle." Then he motioned for me to climb down. As I reached the ground, thinking it was over, he said, "One last thing, drop to the floor right there like you're about to do a push-up." Oh my gosh, what was this all about? Down I went, and this time as I looked from that low angle, I saw what he wanted me to see. In the shadows and under the tables were bits of mop string, pieces of paper, and even a small French fry fragment that had somehow managed to escape my cleaning. Kneeling there on that freshly mopped floor, the smell of bleach wafting up to my nostrils, I realized Ootsie had just shown me one of the biggest lessons of my life. Quality isn't about doing things in the way that's most convenient. It's about looking deeper, seeing things from every angle, checking those hard-to-reach places to make sure you haven't missed anything. After all, Ootsie was famous for one thing. No matter the day or the shift, he never settled, and he wanted us to see things the way he saw them too. That night, he didn't have to say much more to me, with one final nod as he turned to switch off the lights, casting the place into darkness. As he closed the doors behind us, he gave me a pat on the back and said, "Skip, now you get it." There are a lot of things I've forgotten about that job. I can't remember most of my coworkers' names or the exact routine we followed, but I will never forget that sense of clarity and pride that came from seeing my work from different perspectives. Nor will I forget the quiet way Ootsie taught us that Even the smallest things count. The night Ootsie handed me the stepladder at McDonald's, he handed me a key to understanding quality, leadership, and perspective. It was a lesson that's harder to teach in a classroom or a corporate office than it is on a fast food line. Yet it's one that's shaped every role and every team I've ever been a part of since. In a world that often glorifies the loud and visible leader, the forceful one, the someone that tries to lead through might, there's something profound in the quiet authority of a manager who doesn't need to raise his voice. It's a model of leadership that values standards over shortcuts and perspective over complacency. For anyone hoping to lead, to inspire, to create a culture that doesn't just accept the bare minimum, but elevates it, that night in the grill room, as a member of Ootsie's closing crew, was the ultimate education. To this day, those principles I learned under Ootsie, a man running a McDonald's restaurant in a small town, continue to shape the way I see and do everything. Because sometimes true quality doesn't just need to be measured, it needs to be felt. That goes by incredibly fast, doesn't it? Time flies when you're hacking wisdom. Thank you for listening to this wisdom conversation. If you enjoyed this podcast and found the wisdom lesson valuable, then I encourage you to share it with a loved one or friend. Did you know podcast recommendations from one person to another remain the strongest form of podcast growth worldwide? It's true, and we'd appreciate you helping spread the good word. Your feedback matters a lot. If you have a question, a suggestion, maybe an idea, or even a nomination of a future show guest, I'd love to hear from you. Email me at info@themainthingpodcast.com. You can also engage with us on social media. We're on all the places: Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, TikToks, and Threads. In each of those social places, you can find us by our short name, The Main Thing Pod. Once we're connected there, drop us a comment or simply say hi. Now, you're hearing this, so you obviously know about our podcast. But do you also know about our wisdom newsletter? Well, twice a month we publish our free newsletter containing a fresh wisdom lesson along with news about our latest podcast episode, a word of the week, and even some behind-the-scenes glimpses. Our free newsletter is a great way to stay in touch with us, and you can also learn what's coming up. I also promise to keep you posted on the many new cool things our former guests are doing out there in the world. Now, the best way to subscribe to our free newsletter is to head over to our website, themainthingpodcast.com. Once there, simply find your way to the newsletter sign-up link right there on the homepage. Well, that's a wrap for this show. I'm your host, Skip Lineberg, signing off for now and inviting you to join us again next time for another special delivery of wisdom.